Now, the US entered the conflict between Israel and Iran this weekend, bombing Iran's 3 key nuclear facilities. Let's have a listen to what President Trump said.
Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
But it appears Trump is hoping for more than just the end of Iran's nuclear program. Last night on Truth Social, he said this. He said, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? The world is waiting to see how Iran, of course, might retaliate. It vowed everlasting consequences, and its parliament has now voted to block the Strait of Hormuz, which is, just to be clear, a vital shipping lane that ships 20% of the world's oil supply, and that's what passes through it. So you can also see that there are the 3 underground nuclear facilities that the US bombed. They're at Fordo, Natanz, and also at Isfahan. Now, this was unannounced. I'm going to go to the panel. Anne, there's a bombing. You've got the people standing next to Trump, right? The Defense Secretary, Secretary of State, and his Vice President, all of whom were voted in to say, we do not believe in regime change. That was a big reason that MAGA was successful. And how you have the president saying that's precisely what we're doing. Was he right to bomb?
He has, to be perfectly fair on that, he has resisted that for some time. I mean, he's been asked, and he has said very clearly, no, he's not going to go for the Ayatollahs. He's not going to try and pick on a leader as a victim. I think we can all feel safer for the fact that he has bombed the nuclear facilities.
Why?
Well, hang on. We shouldn't also forget that he did offer a civil nuclear arrangement with Iran. Iran won't come to the table. And I feel, so therefore, I feel that he was right to do what he did. I don't, however, think that you make regime change a prime object. It might happen as a result of what you've done, but I don't think you make it a prime object. And hitherto he's resisted it, and I wish that he had maintained that line.
Matt?
Michael.
Oh, Michael, sorry, give me.
I think the idea that Iran hasn't come to the negotiating table, this is what Keir Starmer's saying as well. Iran having nukes would be very dangerous. They must come back to the negotiating table. Now, Iran not only went to the negotiating table, in 2015, they signed a comprehensive nuclear deal with the Obama administration. Now, that meant they couldn't enrich uranium above 3%. For a weapon, you need 90%. They kept to that deal. What happened is that Donald Trump in 2019 ripped it up. Then they entered negotiations with Donald Trump again. They were in the middle of negotiations, and then Netanyahu, because he's wanted a war with Iran for 30 years, decided to bomb the country and the negotiations ended. So the idea that what's really going on here is Iran were being difficult in negotiations, so Trump had no choice but to bomb their nuclear facilities, is just turning reality on its head.
And do you agree with that? Whether that's right or not, they had enriched uranium. They have. There's no really dispute up to a point where it looked like they're absolutely close to getting a nuclear weapon. Would you be happy with Iran getting a nuclear weapon? I wonder that question.
No, I wouldn't. And they have signed the nuclear proliferation treaty, the non-proliferation treaty, and therefore enriching their uranium to a point where it might be possible. To say that this is on the path to make nuclear weapons would be a violation of that agreement. But of course, Iran's always had form on this. If you go back to the days of Ahmadinejad, when he broke the nuclear seals and almost in the same breath said that there should be no such thing as the State of Israel, it's always been dangerous. And I think that you reach a point when you say, actually, at this point, we stop them. And I think that's right. Regime change is a different issue.
Well, let's just ask people at home, what do you think about this? Was Trump right to bomb Iran? We're taking your calls now on 0207 862 2222. Michael, what do you reckon of this idea of regime change? So that actually, this isn't about nuclear enrichment. This was to get rid of the Ayatollah. Now, I wonder about that. You know, there are a lot of people in Iran that are cheering this on. You know,
Are there?
Yeah.
What's the evidence of that?
You can look at social media. You can
Yeah.
look at Anne. I mean, if you want to help, the number of women's organisations that have been fighting for freedom over the years, LGBTQ plus organisations, for example, people that presumably you would support who have been oppressed by the theocratic regime there.
So I think what
But
we're
that's
doing is
not reason enough for a war.
So I think what we're doing is we're falling into exactly the mistake we made in 2003, where we're conflating, is this a nice regime that we like, and should we start a war with them? So obviously, Saddam Hussein wasn't a nice guy. The Iraq War, a catastrophe. The Iranian government, not particularly nice people. A war with Iran, catastrophe. And as you say, there are lots of people in Iran who don't like the Iranian government, who protest against the Iranian government and face severe repression when they do. But I actually haven't seen much evidence that those people are cheering a war by Israel and the United States, because I think most people in Iran recognise that the result of a regime change war or any kind of war isn't going to be some liberal utopia where LGBT rights are going to be respected. It's going to be a failed state. What happened in Iraq? People said, oh, this is brilliant. These Iraqis are going to celebrate the fall of their dictatorship. What the government did was stage that moment where they pulled down the Saddam Hussein statue, and then the whole country just fell into civil war. It was even worse for women, even worse for LGBT people.
Before the Ayatollah came in, it was worse for women and worse for
No, I'm talking
diversity.
about after the 2003 war.
Let's just go
in
to
Iraq.
Cal in London. What do you make of this? Was Trump right to join Israel? And basically, they had the firepower. That's the point. To use the bomb busters, to have the necessary caliber of weapon to get down deep into where the nuclear reactors were. Cal, do you think this is right, or do you think this is dangerous for the world and, of course, this country as well?
As I said to your researcher, welcome to the Greater Israel, which has been the plan of Bibi Netanyahu, which I forgot what his European name is, but that's been his plan since 1992. He's been on banging that drum for the last 30-odd years, saying Iran's going to have a nuclear weapon within weeks, months, or days. So now he's achieved the objective. He wanted to bomb Iran. And
so your view, just to be clear, is that all this is Trump doing Israel's bidding? Anne, what do you have to say to Cal?
I think it's Trump wanting to help Israel, but I don't think that it's just a simple question of, this is something that Netanyahu has always wanted. I think it's a question that there is provocation because of the enrichment.
Well,
I mean, is anybody going to deny the enrichment?
I think the point that Cal makes, which is really important, and it's a clip that many people will have seen on social media, the Daily Show in the United States put it together, and it shows Netanyahu in various moments from 1995 to the present day saying Iran is very close to having nuclear weapons in a year, right? And so the idea that suddenly now there's this big threat when Netanyahu has been saying it for 30 years, Netanyahu has wanted regime change in Iran for 30 years, that it does seem like Trump is being a little bit gullible and going along with Netanyahu, who actively wants a failed state in Iran.
Anyone would think that nothing had happened in those years. I've already pointed...
Do you know what did happen in those years? Is Iran signed a nuclear deal with the United States and then Trump ripped it up.
Well, I'm going to say thanks, Cal, but after the break, we're going to take more on your calls. This is obviously the big news at the moment, consequences for the entire world, whether Trump was right to bomb Iran. Give us your calls now with your thoughts. 0207 862 22. Your calls on whether Trump was right to bomb Iran. The country's military has vowed to carry out what it has called a decisive response after US bombers hit Iranian nuclear sites. Now, this was a very, interesting conversation. And I want to go to you, Anne, because you're about to say something as we went to The Simpsons.
Well, as we went to The Simpsons, I was so rudely interrupted. But what I was actually saying was this. Throughout those years, it hasn't just been that Netanyahu has just come up and said from time to time, there's a bomb very close. It has also been the case that throughout those years, Iran has been provoking and postulating what it can do. And exactly the same thing, we forget this now, but exactly the same thing went on in Iraq, when Saddam was forever postulating that he had the means of weapons of mass destruction, for whatever reason, but he was forever doing it. And the same thing is with Iran. And I actually quoted just now the Ahmadinejad incident. I mean, I quoted it. And we forget
Just remind us
that.
what that was, please.
Yes, he broke the seals on his nuclear facility, and almost in the same breath, not quite, there was, I think, a day in between, he talked about the state of Israel not having a right to exist. Now, that is provocative, and when that happens, obviously Israel's going to respond with its own warnings. And what you've got there is a game of, I think, of bluff and counter-bluff, quite honestly, but now it's come to it.
Mike, what would the world be like if Iran did have a nuclear weapon? It does look like it is at the stage of getting a nuclear weapon. Would that be a good thing, do you think, for the world and make the world safer?
Well, I would like a non-nuclear Middle East. And I think one issue is that Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has a nuclear weapon. Mm-hmm. And that, to some degree, does give it free rein to do what it wants. What we've seen over the past few months, especially over the past 20 months, is Israel seems willing to start wars with all of its neighbours.
Well, let's just see what Christine in Hampshire has to say about this. You saw who was standing around President Trump. He's used military hardware to, destroy Iran's nuclear capability. At the moment, it looks like it's been effective. Certainly, that's what Trump claims. What do you think, Christine? Was this a good thing for, well, not just for America, but for the world?
Absolutely a good thing. I'm old enough, I'm 77, and I'm old enough to remember the chaos that ensued pretty soon after Iran changed to the Ayatollah regime. We've had chaos ever since. Just the very fact that Mr. Starmer talks about terrorist cells waking up. There might be other countries that have got nuclear weapons, but including ours, but we don't go around planting terrorist cells to create chaos. This regime, just this regime, not the Iranian people who I know a few of, they are lovely people. This regime is evil, and they were very dangerous, and I think Mr. Trump has done us all a very big favour.
You think it's done a big favour to the world? Christine, thanks for articulating that point. Aziz, you're in Southampton. Do you agree with her that this is a favour to the world, that it might begin regime change and, above all else, a theocracy that's millenarian? In other words, it believes in the end of days. Having a country like that with the capacity to destroy its neighbours would be a bad thing for the world?
Right. Let me just tell you what the real intentions here are. If you can just go a little bit back. In 1953, Mossadegh, the elected Prime Minister of Iran, there was no Islamic Republic then. Yeah. There were no nuclear weapons there. And we still went and assassinated him. His crime was to nationalize the oil industry there.
That's right. And then he was replaced. I think you're going to tell us he was replaced in regime change by the Shah, who was brought back.
Yeah, who was a stooge. Was a stooge of the West, who was implicated.
But Aziz, I'm sorry to cut you short, but it's important to bring it into the now. So you say that there's a hidden intention
it does matter. It does matter because our intentions are, all this about. We're speaking all about human rights and all that in Iran. It's a hypocrisy. We've always meddled in Iran, and the reason is oil and gas.
So it's oil and gas. It's got nothing to do, you say, with Iran having a nuclear weapon. This is purely about oil and gas. Well, I'm going to come on to you. Thanks for pointing that. I'm going to come on to you, John. If it's about oil and gas, one of the retaliatory measures that Iran could take would to be, it's what they're threatening to do, the parliament's just voted for it, closing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that's where oil and gas flows to. Now, it's not just to America and the West, but mainly to their soft allies like China. Now, that would be a huge problem for the world. Do you think this is about oil and gas, regime change? Do you think Trump was right to go in? You're in Hertfordshire, John. What do you think?
No, I don't think he was right to go in. He's gone in there and bombed the country without declaring war on it. And they don't have the nuclear bomb. Israel has nuclear weapons and nuclear bomb-making facilities. So is Trump now going to go in and bomb the Israeli bomb-making facilities? Mm-hmm. The Israelis did this. The Israelis did this purely to take the world off thinking about them not giving food to the Palestinians who are starving and shooting Palestinians who are trying to get food. This is Netanyahu's attacked something else and it takes our eye off the ball. We should be saying to them, you give up your nuclear weapons
just to be clear, John, we're focusing on Trump. He decided to do this. Are you saying that he's acting as Netanyahu's stooge here? That's your point, is it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Dorothy in Cambridge, I'm going to go to you. Is that right? Is what John says right? That this is simply Trump doing Netanyahu's bidding?
Well, not really. I mean, everybody's saying it's all right to bomb Iran, but Iran, they supply terrorists to kill Israeli people on the 7th of October, beheading children, burning them, thousands of people, hostages taken. Why should we think that Iran? Why shouldn't we think that Iran is doing things behind our backs?
And that's the thing. I don't want to talk over you, Dorothy, but I think that's the point where there's the underlying view that this is really about regime change, that this is cutting off the head of the snake, in other words, that you have Iran who was funding Hezbollah, funding the Houthis, funding Hamas in these proxy wars, hoping that, of course, that they would join in if there was any attack. And actually, that by destroying their nuclear capability, this might result in perhaps a more democratic part of the world. That might be the intention. A lot of people are against that. Marie, you're in West Sussex. Do you think Trump was right to say enough is enough? You shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. We're going to use our military hardware to destroy it?
He should not interfere. If Iran and Israel and whatever want to get rid of each other, let them do it. But don't bring us into it. Don't bring other people into it. The fact is, whenever, I mean, well, I won't call this gentleman from Israel. He's not a gentleman. He's hurt Gaza in as much that children are starving. Then he decides he'll go for Iran. So what next? So Trump comes in. He's going to bomb Iran.
Well, Marie, I mean, just for the purposes of balance, I have to put to you that what the Israelis would say in terms of their bombings, it's been targeted at the people who are the heads of the regime and at their nuclear facilities. But conversely, the Iranian regime, with their ballistic missiles, are firing indiscriminately into Israel as part of their retaliatory measures. But your point about this should never be taking place, that it's not for the West to get involved, it should be between Israel and between Iran, seems to be the force of the views and general view of people at home. So thank you, Marie. After the break, but now more of your calls on this one, whether President Trump was right to bomb Iran, and many people are calling in, to say the least, this morning. Maddie, you're up in Tyne and Wear. What's your view of this?
Good morning, and morning, panel.
Morning.
No, I don't agree that he should have bombed Iran.
Well, why, Maddie?
Well, the whole situation started when Israel bombed Iran, quite out of the blue, and also the day before that Iran was supposed to be having talks with the United States about their nuclear position. Now, Israel has more nuclear weapons than most other countries. So why should it be the one who says, oh, we don't want this country to have it, even when it doesn't have a nuclear weapon?
I hear what you say, Maddie. Now, a lot of people are agreeing this morning. Just to be clear, for the purpose of balance, you understand that Israel has never admitted to having a nuclear program, or indeed how many nuclear weapons it has. But some people say there's a difference. I mean, whether or not Iran were going to come to the table in good faith, it looked like, and I think it's generally agreed by the independent organisations, that they were enriching uranium up to a point where they were very close to getting a nuclear weapon, what that would mean for the stability of the world, including Arab neighbours. So that's all of the Sunni world, all of the Muslim countries, such as Saudi Arabia, who you'll be aware of, and this is to all the viewers out there in our panel, who have remained markedly quiet on what's going on here, certainly when it comes to responding to Israel and America's bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities, not least because they might, you might argue, be potentially the chief victims in that region. If Iran were to get a nuclear bomb, they might start arming themselves. That's one of the issues that no doubt we'll be discussing in due course. The last thing we want are all of those countries getting a nuclear weapon as well. But William, I'm going to go to you. You're in Dorset. Was this a good idea?
Are you speaking to me?
Yeah, to you, William, in Dorset. What do you think? President Trump...
First of all, it was a war crime for Trump to bomb Iran as it was Israel to bomb Iran. The second thing is that Congress in America didn't approve it. 60% of the people in America were against it. But of course, Trump's hoping that the Iranians will attack.
Well, we can see as you're talking to us, William. Just pause for a second. As you're talking to us, we can see protests that were happening in America yesterday. That was in New York. There are no doubt more to follow here and across the United States. But Kerry, you say it's a war crime. Why? What international law have they breached?
Well, because they haven't declared war on them. They haven't. The Iranians haven't done anything to the Americans, or haven't so far. This is the same as when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, December. This is a war crime. As I say, Congress haven't approved it.
Right.
He's exceeded his authority. Yeah. You're not allowed to criticise Israel. The other thing is,
we've got people. What do you mean not allowed to criticise Israel? We've got people on the panel. I mean, across the board, criticising Israel. I'm presenting both sides of the case. What do you mean you're not allowed to criticise Israel?
You're not allowed to. If you criticise Israel, you're labelled anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Semitic, but I do not like Israel. I think they're a pariah state,
right?
And they've caused so many problems since 1947, when Ben Gurion declared UDI, sent an envoy to America to President Truman. Truman put it to his cabinet. They wanted them to recognise Israel as a state, and his cabinet said, "Don't do it because there'll always be trouble in the Middle East."
Well, I hear, but no doubt your history will no doubt remember that the state was created by a UN vote. At that point, the Israelis were settled with the land that they'd been given, and they were attacked almost unilaterally on that night. But nevertheless, whether you're right or you're wrong, let's focus on what's happened now, not on the past, but moving forward. What might be the implications to the world? I'm going to go to the panel before going to Anita in Berkshire. What do you think of this? I mean, there's real consequences for the world. And it's interesting to see what the viewers are saying about this. They are very against what Trump has done here.
Well, some of them are. But I thought that one viewer did well to remind us, of course, of Iran's links with terrorism and with the support that they give to Hezbollah over in Lebanon, to Hamas, Houthis in Yemen. And therefore, I think we forget that. This is not some nice, fluffy, neutral state that has been bombed unilaterally. It was enriching uranium. If it had actually ever got the bomb, I think the whole world would be in a very unstable state. And that is why I support what's been done. And it wasn't an attack on civilians. It was on deep nuclear installations.
Anne, what did you think of the nuclear deal that Iran signed with Obama in 2015, which limited how much they could enrich uranium to 3%?
Well, what did you think of it?
I thought it was great. I think the idea that you say, we'll have an agreement where we lift sanctions on you so that you limit your enrichment of uranium so it can only be for energy purposes, not weapons.
But the suspicion is they've exceeded that.
Well, no, but they did. So there was no suggestion they exceeded that until Trump ripped up the deal. So Trump ripped up the deal, put maximum sanctions on Iran, whereby they didn't just sanction Iran, they sanctioned anyone that traded with Iran. So Iran, I think, went into that diplomatic agreement in good faith. It was ripped up and then they were sanctioned.
You believe the Iranians went into it in good faith, even though they were enriching underground and not for necessarily civilian nuclear purposes?
So no one suggested that they'd broken the nuclear deal. Right, so the International Energy Atomic Agency...
Except they've enriched uranium up to 60%.
Yeah, but that was after the deal was ripped up.
But let's just pause for a second. You made your point that, Anita, you're in Berkshire. There are consequences we've heard potentially for the world. If they close the Strait of Hormuz, that means oil prices are going to go up. That has real world effects for everybody. It makes the world more dangerous as a result of what President Trump has decided to do. But he's done it for purposes which he's articulated. What do you think? Do you think this is about regime change, or do you think this is about just simply stopping Iran having a nuclear weapon? Anita, what's your view?
Yes. Okay. Well, the time has come now. The world has woken up. So people like Anne just doesn't need to say anything because it's ridiculous, her colonial rhetoric. The world has woken up. Well, lovely to see you, Michael, as well. I watch you all the time. Trump has betrayed his MAGA base. Okay, so those people voted for him because he said he will not go into any wars in the Middle East. He wanted to negotiate. He was looked upon as a deal maker. Well, he's obviously something's happened. He's done a 180 degree U-turn. So he's obviously been influenced by Israel. Now, Anne needs to do her research. There are people, very intellectual people in the world, on the world stage, Julian Assange, Scott Ritter, Colonel Douglas McGregor, so many people who are saying that Trump has now broken all international laws. He's totally disregarded UN laws, international laws. Now, as Michael said, he ripped up the agreement.
Well, I hear recently. If you can get to the end of your point, Anne, basically you say that America's in breach of international law, and
of course it is.
The Iranians aren't.
Of course it is. Talking about nuclear weapons, Trump's actual director of intelligence said there's no proof that they've actually developed.
You're talking about Tulsi Gabbard, who I hear you, who actually as you'll be aware, she reversed that view and came out at the other night saying the opposite. Although you make a point, this point that I made at the beginning of this debate. A lot of people who were very supportive of Trump were quite clear in their support that this should never happen. So thanks, Anita. Thanks for all your calls on this later.